of many of these multitude of star races. So through this understanding, it's important for us to realize that unless we understand where we came from and what we're doing here in this reality, and the part that these extraterrestrial races have played in our history, is we're only getting a little small piece of the story. And so I'm hoping with this presentation today that we'll be able to go on this journey together to see what the story is and how it impacts us today. So the question that I always have asked for the last 10 years is, how does extraterrestrial galactic history impact planet Earth? So why is this so important? So when I was doing my research in the last 10 years, so I actually just recently awakened in 2012. So I'm a relative newcomer to this this arena, you know, the spiritual ascension process, you know. So I just feel honored to be here, honestly. But speaking of the ET races, there was actually at least 22 races that have seeded the DNA here on planet Earth. And this is not just human DNA, it's also plant DNA, it's minerals. There's quite a few minerals that came from other star systems. And speaking of plants, I always like to joke about this. It's kind of, because I come from Colorado and cannabis is big in Colorado, but cannabis is actually a plant that originated from Sirius B. And even the word cannabis is derived from Canis, which it means the dog star. You know, so Canis means dog, and bis means bee. You know, so there is quite a few examples of DNA animals. It's thought that elephants was a genetic that came from Arcturus. You know, so we have a multitude and a blend of many different genetic materials that come from lots of different star systems. So they wanted to start this grand experiment. Let's see what happens if we have this melting pot of DNA. So they wanted to take the templates that work so well in these other star systems, like Arcturus and Pleiades and Sirius and Orion, and see if it was going to work well together here on Earth. And we've had some mixed results, to say the least. You know, so it's been kind of interesting history here, to say the least. Okay, so continuing on with this question. So Barbara Marciniak wrote a book. She wrote several books, and I love the term "the living library" because it's a term that I think so beautifully depicts planet Earth. That it's a storehouse of a multitude of genetics from different star systems, and it's just mainly like a microcosm of a macrocosm from our galaxy. So it would make sense that, you know, if Earth is a mix of these different star genetics, and it would have an impact on our history here as well. So these are the races that went through my research and through, you know, the work that I've done with the Galactic Akashic Records, and through the many, many, many Akashic readings I've done for thousands of people in the last 10 years. These are the star races that I believe have had a direct impact on planet Earth. And I'll go ahead and read them for you. So we got Lyra and Vega, who we're going to be featuring. This is a big one. Antares, which is one of the two major stargates in our galaxy. Andromeda, and this includes also Andromeda Galaxy. We're going to be focused more on the constellation today. Arcturus, everybody loves Arcturus. Sirius A, B, and C. Procyon, a kind of a smaller star system, but very connected with Sirius since they are in Canis Minor. Pleiades, which is in the Taurus constellation, major player here. Hyades, which is the Hyades, which is actually a star system that's located also in the Taurus constellation, has very close relations to the Pleiades. Aldebaran, also in the Taurus constellation. Draco, all of us love and hate Draco. We have a love-hate relationship with them. We love dragons, but hate warrior caste reptilians. Orion, Zeta Reticuli, we all love and hate them too. Maybe hate them more than Cassiopeia. We're going to talk a little bit about Cassiopeia in the history of Andromeda. This is an interesting star system. Alpha Centauri, which is our closest neighbor. A little bit of influence from Alpha Centauri. Beta Centauri, Hadar, Apollonia, Pavilla, and Tau Ceti, and more. Tau Ceti is not well known, but it has had a big influence in the Slavic nations on this planet. So we're going to talk a little more about that later. So I'm going to be focusing just on a few of these because we only have a limited amount of time. I could spend hours and hours on this, but I'm going to go ahead and these are the ones we're going to be focusing on today because these are some of the star systems that are some of the more major players in our Earth's history. So we're going to be talking first about Lyra and Vega. Vega being a star system within the Lyra constellation, but I always kind of group those together. Sirius, you're going to see some beautiful depictions of these beings. Pleiades, Andromeda, Arcturus, and Orion. Let's start off with Lyra. Lyra and Vega. So oftentimes, in the last 10 years, I've done, like I mentioned before, thousands of Akashic readings for a multitude of individuals all throughout this planet. I mean, I've had clients all over the world. And in many of these readings, I oftentimes will see Lyra or Vega come up in these readings. And it's like, what is it about this tiny little constellation? It's a tiny constellation. It's only got 13 stars. I mean, it's in this grand scope of things, I think it's only 52nd in size in the grand scope of the constellations within our galaxy. So why is Lyra and Vega so important in terms of our galactic history, and how have they impacted planet Earth? Okay. Well, it's because Lyra, along with its biggest star, Vega, which is also known as Alpha Lyrae, is known as the home of human consciousness. So this star system is a star system that is our founder race in our human form. So the original human template, the original human form was created in this star system in our galaxy and in our universe. And like the slide says, it's where our human story began on many, many multidimensional levels. There is only a few stars in the Lyra constellation. Like I said, it's a very small star system. And in the next slide, we're going to talk about more of the astronomical components of it, but why is it so important? But the major star of origination of the human race was actually Vega. So the blue-skinned Vegan people that we're going to be talking about in the next couple of slides were actually the first race of humans that were developed. And these were the mother goddess consciousness humanoids, blue-skinned, beautiful beings. So there was two ancient races of ancient beings that were the founder races that originated from a different universe. So these beings, the felines and the avians, were the beings that were the co-creators that came from another universe and came to seed physical reality, physical life here in this universe and in this galaxy. And originally, from what my understanding is, from what I've seen in the Akashic records, is that they came in through the Antares portal, which Antares is a major star in Scorpio, the Scorpio constellation. Galactic center is actually located at 28 degrees Sagittarius. So galactic center is actually between Scorpio and Sagittarius. When you look at a star map and you see how close Lyra is to galactic center, it starts to make sense. Like, of course, they would choose a star system that's close to galactic center because that was the portal in which they came through. And then also, they chose Lyra because it had the conditions most favorable for physical reality, for physical life. So the co-creator beings, these felines and these avian beings that came from another universe, knew what they were doing. You know, they had a pretty good sense of it. Now, they also had a big influence on many of our ancient civilizations here on planet Earth. So they helped to establish Atlantis and also Egypt. So this is a whole other maybe a whole other presentation, but we'll go ahead and we'll move forward with the physical components of Lyra. Let's see what the slide shows. Okay, so Lyra Vega star system. So like I mentioned before, it's a small constellation. It looks like a little kite. I mean, it's like a little dinky little star system. And it's located in the 4th quadrant of the northern hemisphere. And actually, its vantage point is that it's close to many other constellations. Cygnus is a big one. Cygnus is the Swan constellation. It was a way station for Lyran refugees when they were escaping the Lyran Draconian Wars. It was where they hid out for a while. But and it's actually also the home of Cygnus, the Cygnus black hole, which is called Cygnus X-1. It's close to Aquila. Now, Aquila is an interesting star system because it's the Eagle constellation. And it's actually located very close to that galactic center we were mentioning earlier. The significance of Aquila is that it is there's a star system there that is the home of the galactic councils. And this is where the galactic councils were originally formulated, was in this particular constellation. And then we have Hercules and the Draco. So Draco is going to come into play here. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned before, Vega is the biggest and brightest star in Lyra. It's actually the 5th brightest star in our entire night sky. So that's pretty significant. A lot of people don't know this, but Lyra and Vega, particularly Vega, was once Earth's North Star. So our North Star keeps shifting. Every few thousands of years, we keep when the Earth axis shifts, it keeps shifting. And it's kind of significant that Earth North Star would originally be Vega because that was the home of human consciousness. That was where humanoids began. So that was our alignment with the original human template. But then, after the Lyra Draconian Wars, it seems like somehow Earth's axis shifted to Thuban. Where's Thuban? It's in Draco. So Earth has had its North Star aligned with Draco for thousands of years. I think that's kind of interesting. And then around a few thousand years ago, it shifted again to Polaris. So currently it's located in Polaris. However, the next time Earth's axis shifts, it's going to shift back to Vega. Isn't that interesting? So we're returning to the original human template. So these are our founder races. So Lyra-Vegan star people are our cosmic ancestors. All of our genetics, everyone here in this room, we all have genetics that originated from these two basic humanoid races. They lived in beautiful paradise planets, and I always like to compare the planets to the movie Avatar. So whenever I do an Akashic reading and Vega or some of the Lyran planets come up, I always like to use Avatar as a comparison, because when I watched the first movie Avatar, and even the second movie of Avatar, which was The Way of the Water, I started crying because it reminded me of Vega. And a lot of people connect with those movies because we have a cosmic memory of, oh, I used to live in these paradise planets. And these were people that were agricultural people. They were very peaceful. And they had a beautiful society that existed for thousands of years. So they didn't get immediately destroyed by Draco all of a sudden. I mean, they existed, and they had this beautiful civilization for thousands and thousands of years before that happened. So here we go, mentioning that they were destroyed eventually through the Lyran Draconian Wars. Millions and millions of people, they say 50 million Lyrans lost their lives during these wars. And there's a whole story behind this. And there was actually planets that were annihilated. When I was doing Akashic readings for a lot of my Lyran-Vegan starseeds, I was noticing that a lot of them have trauma that they're still processing from these wars. You know, what's going on here? And it's because of this connection and this soul memory. It's like these trauma signatures get imprinted into our genetic DNA, and it plays out. You know, so even now we still are feeling the effects of these wars. These wars occurred millions of years ago, so this was quite a long time ago. So it's interesting that it still affects us today, even here on Earth, that it's imprinted in our DNA. But basically what happened, and I'll tell you the quick rundown of what happened with the wars, was that the Draconians that were located in the star system Draco, right next door to Lyra, were interested in Lyra, and they were interested in conquering it. And they ended up, of course, they couldn't just, they were kind of sneaky about it, okay? Let's put it that way. They were sneaky. So, just like a lot of reptilians, they're sneaky about it. So they were like, well, these people are kind of innocent, because these were people that lived in complete unity consciousness for thousands and thousands of years, so they never experienced adversity, never experienced war. And so the Draconians had a vantage point. They reached out and said, hey, we want to be your friends, we want to have this trade. You guys have much natural resources, we have technology, let's do a trade. And the Lyrans, knew that they were lacking in technology, so they agreed to this treaty and allowed the Draconians to visit their stars, their planets. And they were able to figure out, okay, what's their weak areas, and then they ambushed the Lyrans, which was the first great deception, the first great catastrophic event. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Here we got one more bullet here. There we go. So, like I mentioned, there was quite a few lives that were lost, but actually Lyrans are not weaklings, okay? These were people that were quite intelligent, had a lot of ingenuity, and they managed to escape. They had starships, they were able to escape. So quite a few of them also escaped the wars, and they dispersed out into the galaxy. This is just a very simplified template. Like, a lot of them did end up in the Pleiades, but they also escaped to Sirius, Orion, and Andromeda and Earth. That's, like I said, very simplified template, but they actually dispersed to many other star systems too. Okay. there's a beautiful depiction of a Lyran lion being. I know there's some Lyrans here that are going to appreciate this. So we all love cats, right? Yeah. So I know I'm a cat lover. So Lyra Vega, Galactic History and Culture. I already started some of the galactic history with the story of the wars. So we're going to get a little bit into more depiction of the two original human races. So the white Lyran Nordic race, they looked pretty Nordic, were supposed to be the depiction or the representation of the Omega Father God consciousness. So this is the white Lyran races. They were tall, they were beautiful. And these were the root races of all humanoid races in our galaxy, including the vegan races, which I'm going to mention here in a minute. Now, the genetic influences of these races actually came from cat and avian beings. So there was a lot of variation in skin tone, color. They had a red-headed subspecies. They had the platinum blonde subspecies of humanoids. And this was all due to their home planets. Lyrans played an important role in the creation of humanity, and they even seeded the first human souls on Atlantis. So they had a big influence on Atlantean culture. Now, the blue vegan race, I love this race personally. I think blue vegan people, I mean, they're just amazing. They were actually the first race of humanoids that were created in Vega. And these beings were, they looked like, I don't know, Hindu gods, you know, so they were just amazing. They were more the representation of the alpha mother goddess consciousness. So these were beings that were more spiritually oriented. They were more healing oriented. So many of our healing practices first originated in Vega and then were further developed in Sirius, which had a direct impact from Vega. So these were beings that were very focused on service to others. Now, despite their focus on spirituality, what was interesting about the vegan race was that these beings were very spiritually advanced because they were practical. Mothers are practical, okay? Mother goddess consciousness, we're practical, okay? We're always thinking of, okay, how do we take care of things? And I know that's an oversimplification, but they were very technologically advanced because they were ahead of the white Lyrans as far as technology. And they had amazing starships that were visiting Earth back in the early times of Earth, which were depicted in ancient Vedic texts. So a lot of these depictions of these blue-skinned beings that were coming out of these beautiful vimanas were actually probably these vegan beings that were visiting Earth at the time. So like the Lyrans, the vegan people were also colonizing the galaxy, particularly after the wars. So I think we're already on the next slide, so we'll just move along here. So what was their contributions to Earth? What did they bring to Earth? Because they were visiting Earth way back when, in millions of years ago. So this was interesting when I looked at this, I was like, wow, maybe there's some correlation here. So it's said that the Lyrans first brought fire to Earth. And this reminded me of the Greek myth of Prometheus, you know, that he was bringing fire to Earth and to the humans. And I thought maybe Prometheus wasn't really Greek, but he was Lyran, you know, maybe he was a Lyran being. And they also helped to bring the good old-fashioned Lyran work ethic. You know, the Lyrans, they were hardworking people. They were very physically oriented. A lot of them were agricultural, so a lot of us that have Lyran connections feel this affinity for working with plants or working with, you know, growing plants or having crops or, you know, working with plant medicine. You know, so, you know, we see these correlations quite a bit. Okay. They also brought a lot of their knowledge of physical energy to Atlantis and Lemuria. So Atlantis and Lemuria were actually directly influenced by the Lyran races. And many of our inner Earth races were also offshoots of survivors from these from these two civilizations. Okay. Sometimes the slide thing's a little slow here. So there was several specific planets in the Lyran system that brought agricultural skills to planet Earth. And these planets were Avion. Avion was actually the home of the Lyran lion beings, but there was also quite a few humanoids that lived in Avion. Avalon. Everybody, when they hear the word Avalon, it's like, oh, that feels familiar. it's like I love Avalon because it was an origination. It was a Lyran planet long before King Arthur. Apex, Bila, Tika, and Meroc, they all were agricultural systems, and they brought these skills to planet Earth. Vegan colonists brought the skills of physical healing and advanced technology to Earth. So isn't that interesting? Vegans had an interesting mix of spirituality and technology. That's what I love about them. They were really well balanced. Now, this is an interesting thing I kept seeing in the records, was that Ayurvedic medicine actually originated from Vega. So this went long beyond India, okay? So the Indian culture here on planet Earth was actually heavily influenced from Vega. And you'll see this in one of our latter slides. But the Ayurvedic medicine practices came directly from Vega. Okay, we're going to move on to Sirius, and you're going to see some depictions of beautiful Syrian beings. So here we go. Let's get into Sirius. Here we go. Okay, so a lot of us hear the word Sirius, and there's the Sirius radio station or network that a lot of us play in our cars. I know I like the 80s channel, so that's probably the main reason why I keep Sirius FM, just because of the 80s. But just showing my age here, but what's the impact of Sirius? Why is Sirius so important to Earth? Sirians were actually one of the very first star races that were visiting planet Earth. So Sirius was one of the forerunners of the colonization here on planet Earth. And the reason for that was mostly because of the proximity of Sirius to Earth. Sirius was only 8.7 light years from Earth, so relatively speaking, they were fairly close. Only Alpha Centauri is closer. So after the wars, many survivors from the Vega and the other Lyran systems settled into the planets that revolved around the Sirius star system. And it was mainly Sirius A. A lot of my clients also feel an affinity for Sirius B, which we'll also talk about. Sirius B was where the cannabis came from, in case. But it was also a star system that had very beautiful watery planets with dolphins and whales and Syrian mer people. But Sirius A was the star system that the refugees ended up settling. So although Sirius is a binary and even a trinary star system, they settled in Sirius A mainly because the planets there were uninhabited. Sirius B had planets that were somewhat, I would say, already inhabited by the Syrian amphibian beings. So, obviously they wanted to settle in some place where they can spread out. And it was actually very suitable for humanoid and felines. So there was quite a few Lyran lion beings that also settled in Sirius A. I always kind of compare Sirius to Lord of the Rings. I don't know. It's very mystical, magical. There's much diversity of beings in Sirius. It's just a beautiful star system. I love Sirius. So what happened was, these Vegan and human and Lyran refugees and the lion beings were all kind of living together, and they decided to start this new civilization. And the Lyrans, and this was the first time we were starting to see genetic mixing as far as humanoids, because the Lyrans and the Vegans were previously separated in their own different star systems, but then once they got together in Sirius, they started intermarrying and intermixing, and they created the new the Syrian humanoid races. Okay. So cat beings that escaped the Lyran Wars also made their home in Sirius A. And like I mentioned before, they established a new Syrian civilization. So here, as far as planet Earth is concerned, Sirius had a huge impact on ancient Egypt, African tribes, and other ancient people have legends and connections with this star system. So you see this star system come up with the Dogon people in Africa, with the Anunnaki in the Middle East, and ancient Egypt had a heavy influence from Sirius. Okay, so little factoids here about the star system itself. So Sirius is actually a star cluster that's in it's called the Dog Star, the blue star, and it's part of the Canis Major star constellation. It's a binary star, but there was also possibly at one time Sirius C, which when I saw in the record, Sirius C got destroyed, but that was where the planet Nibiru and the Anunnaki originated from. So we can do a whole other thing on Sirius C, but we're going to focus for purposes today on Sirius A and B. Now, Sirius is actually our brightest star. So whenever we look at the night sky, all of us always see Sirius because it's so bright. The reason why it's so bright is because of its relative closeness to planet Earth, and also because we're actually seeing two stars. So we're seeing Sirius A and B together. So from that vantage point, it looks very, very bright. It's also one of our closest neighbors. It's the home to many galactic species. Only Orion is more diverse than Sirius. Sirius had amphibian beings, they had avian beings, they had cat beings that we mentioned earlier, they had elementals, they had it all. Like I said, Lord of the Rings. And most of them tend to be benevolent towards humans, Earth humans, but some of them maybe not, like some of our Sirius C beings. They had actually reptilians as well. It was kind of half and half with the reptilians on Sirius. Some of them were very benevolent and amazing healers, and others of them were not so much. But they too escaped the wars. They were like, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to settle someplace away from Draco, So now, dolphins and whales, I know a lot of us feel this great affinity for these beings, actually originated from Sirius B. So a lot of us feel this deep, deep connection with these beings because we actually had incarnations there, and we feel this affinity for these beings. And we have some depictions of these Syrian humanoids here. Okay, let's see. So now, like I mentioned before, they did play a major part in Earth's history. They actually visited Earth 4 to 5 million years ago. That's quite a long time. They had a direct impact on these major civilizations, ancient civilizations, including Atlantis, Egypt, and Samaria. We're going to talk about this more in other slides, but the Syrians are known as the masters of physical healing. Much of our healing modalities originated from the Sirius star system. Syrian history. So Syrian culture was based on Alpha Mother Goddess consciousness and emphasized the divine feminine. But what was interesting about Syrians was that initially when they were colonizing Syrian planets, they were really focused on technology. And why was that? It was because they were trying to protect themselves. They didn't want to encounter another draconian war situation, so they ended up investing a lot of energy into ramping up their technology. So Syrians actually have amazing technology. The Syrians were also able to upgrade their starships, and what they were using these starships for initially were exploration missions, where they were going out to all throughout the galaxy to gather information and bring it back to Sirius. They were very concerned about information that was lost during the wars, and so they ended up going out and they were bringing it back to Sirius for safekeeping, which ended up, because of that, okay, let me see if I can bring up this next, they ended up, after many generations, becoming more focused back in the service to others modality, and they ended up creating the Syrian mystery schools. A lot of us here have a deep affinity and connection with these schools, and so this was the service to others orientation. And these schools were actually encompassed quite a few different topics, a lot of spirituality, but also a lot of healing modalities. So this is where I was mentioning that a lot of our healing modalities here on this planet originated from these schools. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, they were the masters of physical healing. I'm going to repeat this because this is a very important part of Syrian influence on planet Earth. So what was their contributions to Earth? Okay, so they're one of the 4 races of beings that seeded life on Earth and played a huge part in Earth's history and development. So the Syrians were one of the they were master geneticists. They were very adept in physical healing, and they knew the human body quite well. And so they actually, through their contribution, helped advance the indigenous humans that lived here to Cro-Magnon man and then also to Homo sapiens. So, like I mentioned, they did 2 versions of human beings, and they mixed their own DNA. Now, the other contribution is that a lot of our healing modalities came from Sirius. So physical, aura healing, crystal healing in particular, but also acupuncture, meridian work, body work, all of it came from Sirius. So a lot of the Atlantean knowledge came from these, that in these systems came from Sirius. And Syrian souls went to Earth, to Egypt, and they brought structure and civilization to Earth society. Syrians were practical people. You know, they had an understanding that, hey, we live in a physical reality, we need to have structure, we need to have civilization, we need to have systems in place. So they're very system focused. Now, pyramids and temples, they had pathways and tunnels connecting them to the stars and inner worlds. For instance, the pyramids in Giza, they're all aligned with the Orion belt stars, but the shafts are all aligned with Sirius. So there was a reason for that. Okay, we're going to move into the Pleiades. Everybody's favorite star system. We all love the Pleiades. I love the Pleiades. It's a beautiful star system. So the Pleiadian people were also descendants of Lyran refugees. So like I was saying, they were all dispersed out into the galaxy. So these people were descendants of refugees that left the Lyran Draconian conflicts. They came from the star cluster called Pleiades. And this is located in the Taurus constellation. So the Pleiades consist of at least 7 well-known bright stars. It actually contains many more stars than that, but it's a star cluster. So the Taurus constellation is a big constellation, and it has many different star groups, and the Pleiades is just one of them. So since the departure from the wars, the Pleiades remained in the Pleiades star system, and the reason why they chose the Pleiades, honestly, is because it's 500 light years away from frickin' Draco, okay? So they were just like, we're going to get the heck out of Dodge and get as far away as possible from these crazy draconian beings. But they also they ended up developing their civilization way beyond their Lyran ancestors. You know, so they were like hey, we need, also like the Syrians, hey, we need to upgrade our technology. We need to upgrade our spiritual development. And they relied quite a bit on the Arcturians and also the Andromedans for guidance, you know, with these two systems. So the Pleiadians were an ancient race of humanoids. They discovered Earth, at least they say about 225,000 BC. So they came a little bit later than the Syrians. Syrians are way ahead of them. But they have also played a large role in our evolution. So throughout many of our cultures here on planet Earth, many civilizations, the Mayan civilization, the Native Americans, the civilizations in Eastern Europe, I mean, many of them have alignment with the Pleiades for a reason, because that's their star ancestors. Now, it's interesting they said that the Pleiadians left in 10 AD. I'm kind of moving on to the next slide already, but I think that was because that was when the Middle Ages started. And they were just like, oh, human evolution is going in the opposite direction. We're out of here for a while. We're not coming back until the humans get it together. So it took us a few hundred years, but let's see. Pleiades star system. Some factoids about the system itself. It's an open star cluster in the Taurus constellation. 500 light years, very far away. And you can actually see it with the naked eye, but it looks far away. I mean, it does look like it's a ways. Now, these are the major stars, and a lot of times when I do Akashic readings, I'm focusing in on the civilizations of these particular star systems, because even though they're part of the Pleiades umbrella, they each have their own specific civilization. So Alcyon and Taygeta are the two major systems. It was where the Lyran refugees first settled after the wars, but they since branched out to Merope, Seleno, Electra, Maya, Asterope, Atlas, and Pleione. Pleione is one of my, I love Pleione because it reminds me of, I don't know, it's like a spiritual retreat star system. I don't know. It's such a cute little star system, but not many people don't know about Pleione. Another one of my favorite ones is Merope. Merope is where the ancient priestesses that used to do psychospiritual healing originated. And not, even though you're going to see some depiction of blonde-headed, beautiful Pleiadian beings, they actually had a lot of diversity in the Pleiades. They had indigenous people that looked more darker skin, had darker hair. They had the Nordic types. They had red-headed people. I mean, they had it all in the Pleiades. I actually have quite a few clients who are African American or from Africa that have lifetimes in the Pleiades. So, so don't take these depictions to heart. Okay. So these were mostly descendants of Lyran refugees. We already talked about that. They were important to ancient and modern Earth civilizations. So the Pleiadians, along with the Syrians, also contributed DNA to create Earth-human genetics. And let's see. So what was the Pleiadian focus? Their focus was a little different. They're more emotional healers. You know, so these were psycho-spiritual healers. These people delved into the realm of the psyche. And so they were the masters of unconditional love, goddess energy, and higher consciousness. See what we got. Oh, now we got some Pleiadian beings. Okay. So we're going to see what these... So what's going on with these beings? And like I said, not all of them look like that. I mean, that's just the stereotypical image. But so they're a mix of Lyran refugees. We already talked about that. Due to the Lyro-Draconian Wars, they escaped. We already talked about that. Some of them did settle on planet Earth. So there was Pleiadian colonies, and we're going to talk about that in a later slide. Pleiadians are humanoids that have a higher spiritual calling. So they fight the negative agendas. So there's quite a few Pleiadian beings connected with the Galactic Federations that are currently trying to mitigate some situations here on Earth. And they do have advanced technology. So we're going to move on. So what was their contributions to Earth? I didn't know this until I did some research, but all Earth language, so all of our languages, I would say the majority of our languages come from the Pleiades. So the Pleiades actually contributed the gift of language to our civilizations here on Earth. It came from an ancient pre-Sumerian language called Tamil. And this was spoken in Lyra and the Pleiades. So even our alphabet comes from the Pleiades, which I thought was fascinating. They're very affluent in our sciences. So Pleiadians are one of those races of beings, I would say, that are very aligned with Earth humans. They understand us very, very well. They have a beautiful technology that enables them to travel at speeds faster than the speed of light, which is amazing. I hope we get that technology here. We got to get it here, so because we need some faster transportation. But yeah, because the airports, the delayed flights, the TSA, that ain't happening. That's got to change. So the Pleiadians are concerned about Earth's misuse of our environment and our sciences and spirituality. So they're trying to guide us, but they're not gonna overtake our free will, but they are trying to guide us in these areas. Pleiadians, they went through their own evolution. They struggled quite a bit also with spiritual bypassing and codependency issues in the beginning of their civilization. And so these are all lessons that a lot of Pleiadian starseeds currently go through, initially in their development. A lot of them master these lessons and move on, but they actually get really upset about these darker, benevolent beings trying to take advantage of Earth beings. You know, they don't like that. And like I mentioned in the previous slide, they do have advanced technology that they're using in conjunction with the Galactic Federation. So they're trying to protect us from alien invasion, alien wars, that sort of thing. Okay, we're moving on to another favorite star system, Arcturus. Near and dear to my heart, but Arcturus they're an alien race that come from a blue planet. There's actually, I think, 2 major planets in the Arcturus system that contain Arcturian beings, but we'll get into that another time. But they orbit the red star Arcturus. Now, Arcturus is also relatively close to Earth. It's only 36 light years, so not as far as the Pleiades, not as close as Sirius. But according to Edgar Cayce, this man was amazing. He was the forerunner of the Akashic Records, in my opinion. The Arcturians are the most advanced alien civilization in the galaxy, according to Edgar Cayce. So Arcturian beings come from a different consciousness, which we're going to get into a little bit more in the next few slides. But they believe in a higher state of being, and they've mastered many aspects of today's modern technology and metaphysical beliefs. So they actually, along with the Pleiadians, have done a lot to protect our planet from alien invasion from benevolent beings. That's why we haven't seen that yet, and we won't see it. Arcturians are also known for their power of healing. They're master healers as well, but they heal more on an energetic frequency level. They restructure genetic DNA. I mean, they're just amazing. But they also have mastery of the conscious mind. So a lot of our evolution in spiritual development actually came from the Arcturians. They call the Arcturian way the art of the mind. Okay. Oh, I'm kind of moving a little ahead there. Oh, well, we'll just move ahead. Let's see, we're back. Now we're going to have to go through this whole thing. Okay, we'll go through the whole thing. Okay, all right. So Arcturus star system. This is our depictions of Arcturians. So Arcturus is an orange reddish star in the Bodas constellation. It's on the other side of Draco, okay? So also located kind of in that general location in our galaxy. And And they're the fourth brightest star, so they're fairly bright. So usually in the summer sky here in the northern hemisphere, you can see Arcturus pretty well. They are known for advanced knowledge, wisdom, and extremely high frequencies, at least 5D, but up to 12 dimension, maybe even higher. Earth frequency is very harsh and dense for them. So as far as star seeds are concerned, Arcturians and Andromedans are probably the rarer of the star seeds. We see a lot of Sirian and Pleiadian star seeds, but okay. And like I mentioned before, they specialize in emotional and spiritual healing. They are masters at integrating technology with spiritual energies. Now, Arcturus is interesting because it's one of the two major stargates that I mentioned earlier. We have Antares, which is the portal between Andromeda Galaxy and this galaxy, and then we have Arcturus, which has a different mission. Okay, so Arcturus is the home of the energy gateway where souls pass after death and before their next incarnation. So this is why Arcturus is a major player in this galaxy. And J.J. Hurtak talks about this quite a bit in his book, The Keys of Enoch. He's running around here somewhere with Desiree, his beautiful wife. So they're also known as the keepers of the Akashic Records. They're not the creators of the Akashic Records. Actually, all of us are the creators we all contribute to the Akashic Records, but they are the keeper of these records. They're also the creators of complex sacred geometries. For example, the crop circles. A lot of the crop circles here on planet Earth have been created by Arcturian ships. So a little bit about their galactic history. They're not descendants of Lyran Vegan refugees. They come from a different consciousness. So they've come through their own evolution, and they have a separate mission from the other humanoid races. Now, they were set aside to be the guardians of star races and systems in this galaxy. So that's why, so you had to have like what they call it, referees. You know, today's the Super Bowl, so we have to have referees, and that's what part of their role was, to be referees. Now, the Arcturian beings are the least physical of many star races because they're so high dimensional. But they're also a prototype for future civilizations. So they consider themselves to be a prototype for our evolution here on planet Earth. They work closely with the Brotherhood of the All and also with the Fraternity of Totality and the Galactic Command. And they have some of the most advanced starships in our galaxy. Arcturus contributions to Earth. Now, the reason why, like I mentioned before, we haven't had an alien invasion on planet Earth is mostly because of the Arcturian interference. So they have beautifully technologically advanced ships. A lot of people have heard about the Athena, which is one of their ships, which is actually located in this solar system. They're gifted healers, but they're very, very different from Andromedan healers. Andromedan healers use a lot of sound frequency. Arcturians use a different frequency through crystal, through a multitude of different. We like tools. We like to use our tools. So they will assist Earth, but they tend to have more of a hands-off approach than maybe some of these, the Sirians and the Pleiadians. Now, this is an interesting thing that I've seen with a lot of my clients, is that some of them will be brought on board the starships during dream time for healing. And some of my clients will actually remember this. And they're like, where was I at? And I said, oh, you were on an Arcturian ship. And they were doing an activation or healing. But they would never violate a person's free will, unlike the gray aliens. So they're here to assist humans to ascending to the fourth and fifth dimensions and to raise our vibrational frequencies. They are the guardians and protectors of higher consciousness here in the universe. So amazing, amazing beings. Andromedans. So we got some winged Andromedans here. Okay, that's a lot of wordage there. I'm going to try to I'm going to try to break this down for you guys. So, the Andromedans were predominantly human races that also were the descendants of Lyran refugees. So they came to particularly two different star systems within Andromeda, which I understand to be Alpharaz and Meroc, but I think also Almach eventually got colonized, and Alex Collier is the master of Andromeda, so you guys should check him out if you're interested in Andromeda. But we're talking about the constellation here, not the galaxy. That's a whole other discussion. But there's at least 28 different races of beings, and they have a multitude of different types of beings, including plants, elementals, even some Andromedan mermaids, and etheric and plasmic conscious life forms. So there's also 7 to 9 foot tall winged humanoids that exist in the higher dimensions in Andromeda. Andromeda is extremely spiritually advanced. I mean, these are beings that have transcended levels that we can only dream of here on Earth. Now, some of these winged beings might have had their origins with the avian races, maybe some of those hybrids that we were talking about earlier. Now, they're about 45,000 years ahead of us technologically. Now, this is, and they're very spiritually advanced. They are considered to be the guardians of the 7th and 9th dimensions. Let's see. Andromedans are noted for, they're also, like the Pleiadians, part of the Galactic Federation, and they're mostly noted for technology and science, so. However, I do have quite a few Andromedan starseeds that are masters at energy healing. I mean, these are in sound frequency and light language, so they also delve into those realms as well. So they're not all tech whizzes. I mean, we see a combination also with Andromedans, but they are known for scientific endeavors. Now, the frequency in Andromeda is so much higher here on Earth that Andromedan starseeds are one of our rarest starseeds because it takes a lot of sacrifice for them to leave the high vibrations of Andromeda and come here to the dense energies here on planet Earth. So because of that, a lot of them do suffer from physical ailments. They have a variety of different physical challenges. Andromeda star system. Okay, a little bit about the constellation itself. It's a fairly large constellation. It's the 19th largest constellation. It's located above the constellations of Aries and Pisces in the zodiac wheel, and it's named after the mythical princess Andromeda, the wife of Perseus. It's also located very close to Cassiopeia, which was a way station for Lyran refugees after the war. And the Cassiopeian beings were actually cat beings. Now, Alpharaz is the biggest star, but Almach and Meroc are also important star systems in the Andromeda constellation. And like I mentioned before, home to 28 species of beings, and many of them were humanoid, but not all of them. Andromedans are considered to be the masters of technology and all forms of scientific endeavors, but also masters of frequency healing. Now, when you encounter Andromedan beings, they look humanoid, but they have a very angelic presence. They look very angelic. We'll talk about that more in another slide, but they are considered to be the guardians of spiritual development because they are so high vibrational. So they're a little bit of their galactic history and culture. Again, they're descendants of Lyrans. These are the humanoids, not the indigenous Andromedan beings. Okay, so we're mentioning the Cygnus and Cassiopeia, which Cygnus and Cassiopeia were both way stations after the wars. Cassiopeia was on route towards Andromeda. So when the Lyran ships were escaping the wars, some of them went way off to Cassiopeia. And just to give you some perspective on this, Andromeda constellation is 2,000 light years from Lyra. So they traveled many, many years to get there. Some of them really wanted to get away from Draco. But they had to stop off, and another star system, and Cassiopeia was that star system. It looks kind of like a upside down W or a zigzag when you see it in the night sky, but there was actually etheric cat beings that were acting as triage nurses that were assisting them. And they recommended that, hey, you guys can't settle here, this is our home, but why don't you guys move on to Andromeda? Okay, so we mentioned the two solar systems, which was Alpharaz and Meroc, and then eventually Almach. And these systems were actually terraformed to accommodate them. When I looked into the records, Andromeda is interesting in the sense they don't have much gravity on their planets, so they have floating cities in the sky. Their technology is so amazing that they don't even live on their planet. They live in the atmosphere, I guess, but they have amazing starships like the Arcturians. So because their planets were so different than what they came from, so they came from Lyra, which was a lot like planet Earth, and then they come to Andromeda, where there's very little gravity and copper is abundant. Their skin started changing, and they started turning blue, and their bodies became more elongated. So they started evolving to a body form that was going to fit better with their new environment. Because they were so remotely located, they ended up evolving very rapidly. So that's why they're so advanced. Okay, so what's their contributions to Earth? Now this is interesting. I was doing some research about this, and I was checking the records, and I was like, wow, Andromedans were visiting Earth like that millions of years ago. It wasn't just Sirians. Now they were co-working with this. They were working with the Sirians on some of these early missions to Earth. But the Andromedan focus was more the fauna and the flora. Andromedans are always more focused on the environment. They don't want to have much dealings with Earth humans. I don't know, maybe for a good reason. But they assisted the Sirians with some of their colonies on the planet and some of their scientific missions. Like I mentioned, they were interested in the fauna and the flora, but they also assisted the Sirians with some of the Earth-human genetic manipulation. They revered the law of free will and freedom so much that they pretty much have a hands-off approach, even more so than the Arcturians. They only intervene when they absolutely have to. And for that reason, they didn't contribute as much to Earth-human genetics. Now, the etheric wing beings that we see here from Andromeda might have had some involvement with Earth during the early history of the planet. And it's thought that the Sumerian wing beings were probably more depictions not of Anunnaki, but maybe of these Andromedan beings that were visiting during that time. Okay, Orion, this is our last star system, and then we're going to wrap it up. Okay, so another wordy paragraph here. I'm a wordy person, so I apologize for that. So what's the impact of Orion? It's not only one of the biggest constellations in our night sky, but it had a lot of influence on planet Earth. So some of the negative extraterrestrials that we all know and want to hate or want to love came from Orion. There was a lot of Orion negative factions that came and inhabited planet Earth. We'll talk about that in another couple of slides. But it's also claimed that Orion was also the cosmic doorway to infinity, or the realm of the Creator. And this was coming directly from Orion Nebula, which you're going to see an image of in the next slide, or one of the two slides here. But it transcends time, space, matter, universe. So there was I call Orion the melting pot of our galaxy, because it was kind of like the place where a lot of races got deposited, or ended up there for some reason. And so there was a lot of diversity in Orion. So there was the base of a joint reptilian gray empire, and also the human resistance group. So here we're seeing the themes of Star Wars here. So it's thought that the popular Star Wars movies that we love so much here on Earth was actually heavily based on the Orion Wars. So when I was watching, I love Star Wars. I'm a big sci-fi fan, and so it was when I was watching some of these Star Wars series on Disney Plus, and I'm like, wow, that reminds me of Orion. That reminds me of Orion. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, so I think a lot of us connect with Star Wars for that reason. So Orion initially, or eventually shifted to Orion-like consciousness. But before that, it was very much associated with polarity conflict. So a lot of our duality consciousness actually originated from Orion. Thanks, Orion. So Earth is kind of following the same path as Orion, where we're attempting this integration of the duality consciousness into the integration of these polarities. And so a lot of humans feel this direct connection with Orion for that reason, because some of them may have had incarnations there. And we're replaying some of these same patterns here on Earth. Okay, let's get some. So there's a nice depiction of the Orion system. So again, this is part of the northern sky. It's very well-known, very easily recognized constellation. It's known as the Hunter, located by the belt stars. The belt stars are, I call the belt stars the good zone, because that's where most of the humanoids ended up, and most of the resistance fighters, the Black League resistance fighters, were located there, kind of like the Star Wars saga. But so that was Analam, Analtak, and Mintaka. Mintaka in particular is one of the highest vibrational systems in Orion. It was directly connected with Arcturus. They did a lot of interchange between Arcturus and Mintakas. So my understanding from the Akashic records was that the headquarters for the Galactic Federation involvement in Orion was located in Mintaka for that reason. Now, Betelgeuse, Bellatrix, and Rigel were also other well-known stars in this system. So these were the reptilian and gray alien outposts. So, and it was pretty bad there. It was like human trafficking, slavery, all of it. I mean, there was a lot going on in these systems. A lot of it that's being replayed on a microcosm level here on planet Earth. It's also the home of the Orion Nebula, where 1,000 stars were born, and the home of the Orion Light Councils. A lot of different races there. But they also included reptilians, gray aliens, and insectoid beings. So it was a big melting pot, a lot of different races. They are associated with polarity conflict, because there was a lot of wars for millions of years in this system. Here is Orion Nebula. I knew I was going to come up. So what about their galactic history? We mentioned that as the melting pot. Now, the humanoids in Orion were actually, majority of them were descended by blue Vegans, but there was also a few of the white Lyrans, but mostly blue Vegan races. So they were darker-skinned people overall. And they settled mostly in the belt stars that you see here. Now, the Orion reptilians originated from Draco, so that they were descendant from the draconian beings. And they settled mostly in Rigel and Betelgeuse. The small grays, now they had small grays, tall grays, insectoid beings also in Orion. Now, Zeta Reticuli is actually a close neighbor of Orion. So it just made sense that there was quite a few gray aliens settling in Orion. Tall grays and insectoid and amphibian beings were also there. Now, we talked about the wars, so we're going to move on. What were their contributions to Earth? Now, the aggressive, patriarchal, masculine component here on this planet, we have to thank Orion for it. Thanks, Orion. We're trying to move out of that that system. Okay, so it was good for a few thousand years, but we're over it. We're ready for some divine feminine influence. So thanks, Orion. Yeah. So I'm going to mention Maldek a little bit. Maldek was what I call the Australia of our galaxy because the Orion Empire would send their criminals to Maldek, their malcontents to Maldek. And Maldek was a system, a little planet that used to be located between Mars and Jupiter. And because they were a criminal element, they fought a lot with each other, blew the planet up, and now we have the asteroid belt. So, and those souls ended up reincarnating on Mars and Earth and have been here since the time of Atlantis. They actually infiltrated in Atlantis. Now, Orion wasn't just a dark system. They also had some positive qualities. A lot of our systems here on Earth, our business systems, our financial systems, government, and industry came from the Orion systems, you know. So for good and for bad, I guess we have Orion to thank for that. I'd like to see some of that changed, but okay. Now, this is my belief, is that right now we're aligned very heavily with Orion, the Orion template here on planet Earth. But as we move towards the fourth and fifth dimensions, we're going to become more aligned with the higher vibrational templates of the more advanced races, such as the Lyrans and the Pleiadians. So remember I was talking about how the Earth axis is going to shift eventually back to Vega, and that's what we're moving back to, is the original human template, which is what we were all supposed to be. Okay, so we got a couple of more slides here and then we'll wrap it up. This is a slide I want to spend a little time on. I don't know how much time I have left. Where's my time person? But I want to spend, okay. 10 minutes, yeah, we got some time here. So this is a very impactful slide because I'm going to be depicting actual areas of Earth and what star systems influence them. So this is going to be interesting, I think, for you guys. So there's specific areas of Earth that were colonized by different star people. Now what's the UK? Okay, I get a lot of clients from the UK. So the systems that influenced UK was Pleiades, Lyra, Andromeda, and Sirius. So they had quite a mix in the UK. But a lot of Andromedan influence, which is really interesting. Northern Europe and Scandinavia was mainly influenced by Aldebaran, which is in the Taurus constellation, and also the Pleiades. So you see a lot of the Nordic genetics still there. China and Southeast Asia have Draco, Orion, and Andromeda influences in their genetics and their culture. I always like to use this as a depiction, but a lot of the elaborate costumes and beautiful headdresses that you see in Asian culture was actually derivative of the Andromedan culture. They dressed very similarly, so that's just a depiction of that. Africa had Anunnaki, Sirius, and Orion influence. Italy had Arcturus and Pleiades. Greece, Antares, that original Stargate. Middle East has influences also like Africa, Anunnaki, Sirius, and Orion, particularly Egypt and Samaria. Russian, Slavic, Balkans, Tau Ceti. I didn't talk much about Tau Ceti. It's in the Cetus constellation. Humanoid beings settled there and had a direct influence in this particular location on planet Earth, but they also had quite a bit of influence from Lyra and the Pleiades. Australia, Arcturus, and Andromeda, mainly because of Lemuria. Lemuria was actually a civilization that was founded by the Andromedans and Arcturians. So you see a lot of Andromedan Arcturian influence in the Pacific Rim. So you see a lot of that, and you'll see that as we go along here. New Zealand, Andromeda. Hawaii, Polynesia, Arcturus, and Andromeda. Pacific Rim. South America indigenous had influences from Pleiades, Procyon, and Sirius, particularly the Pleiades. You see a lot of the Mayan temples aligned with the Pleiades. There's a reason for that. North America, indigenous, Pleiades, Sirius, and Arcturus. India, West Asia is Vega and Sirius. So I mentioned before about Ayurvedic medicine. This area of the planet had a lot of influence from Vega. I think that's it. Okay. So the significance of this is when I do Akashic readings for my clients, I oftentimes see correlations of their Earth lineage with some of their star system genetics. So there's a reason why a lot of us choose to be born in certain families, because we all carry DNA markers, soul DNA markers, but we also have to have an alignment with Earth. So a lot of times we'll choose families that also contain these DNA markers. Okay, last few slides here, let's see. So it's thought that that the extraterrestrial creators, they say at least 2 times they were directly involved with the jumpstart of human evolution with Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal Cro-Magnon, and then eventually Homo sapiens. So this happened approximately 400,000 years ago. And then about 200,000 years ago, we had Homo sapiens. But at the same time, this was in the Anunnaki, were manipulating our DNA and reduced our DNA from 12 strands to 2. This is a whole other story here, so I'm not going to get into it. But now they did this in order to prevent us from overtaking them, because here on Earth we evolve a lot faster. It's kind of like a microcosm. It's things speed up a lot faster here on Earth as far as evolution than any other star system, and that's why the extraterrestrial races were so interested in our star system, because evolution just happens faster here. We're one of the races of being, probably one of the only races of beings that have evolved as fast as we have. Because when we're talking about galactic history, it took them millions of years to get to where they're at, and we're going through it in a few thousand years. So that's very impactful. And that's why a lot of these star races are really interested in Earth right now to see what's going to happen. Now, like I mentioned, because we're evolving so quickly, we're going to be rapidly catching up with our star families as far as technology, evolution, spirituality, and this is currently happening now as we speak. So we're not slouches. I know it feels that way sometimes in this dark realities, but we're not slouches. We're actually considered to be genetic royalty here in this galaxy for that reason. Okay, let's get to the last. So this is my little closing comment here. Understanding the parameters of galactic history in terms of the various extraterrestrial races, conflicts, and migrations is essential for all Earth humans to fully comprehend not just our past, but also our ascension and evolution to our future as true galactic citizens of this galaxy. So I want to close with this comment. Just some credits here. Oops, let me go back to the credits page. Oh, no. This pointer thing is a little glitchy, so I apologize for that. Okay, presentation content and research, yours truly. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. The gentleman that was sitting right over here is actually, he's the person that created all this beautiful imagery for the slideshow. So I want to invite all of you to check out his presentation. It's going to be happening at 4 o'clock in the Plaza Room. His name is Billy Rude, and he is amazing. So I hope you will consider checking his presentation out in another half hour or so. I want to thank you all for attending this presentation. And as far as I guess we got one. Thank you. Thank you. So here's my website. And we got cards up here if you guys want to take one of my cards. Yeah. Okay.
can I take a quick picture?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.